You know how this channel loves to operate. We go deep into the heroes of the Genestealer Cult, the Battle Sisters of the Adepta Sororitas, and the Deathwatch of the Imperial Agents. That last one does still feel weird to say, but in December there will be new Deathwatch only rules, and I have a video on that. With the balance of points, Games Workshop wants to address the internal balance of factions, something I was planning to do in a video today, but why would Games Workshop be consistent with release dates? It's almost always a Thursday. But never mind, I'll just put that work in the bin. Or slide it into this video somewhere, or a later video. But let's get on to the points, but also the rules. While this is meant to only be a points change for units and rules changes come later in the year, probably December, there are loads of FAQ and errata changes which may change how you play the game. But I also want you to remember something. This is not a video game with auto-installed patches. If you and your friends don't like a rules update or clarification, you can play however you want. Tournaments may still play however they want with rules modifications. You can modify the rules of the game. This is a tabletop wargame with optional rules. If you don't have a place to store your friends when not in use and only play against random people at a club, you will have to pay attention to the updates that I'm explaining and then, if you want, read the vast amounts of text Games Workshop has dropped. So I'll start with the rules that affect everyone. And by everyone, I mean the three main factions you are here to understand, but really, everyone. Surge moves and reactive moves. This will affect the Metamorphs of the Genestealer Cult, the Surging Penitent units of the Battle Sisters using Devout Fanaticism, and any other unit that can do an out-of-phase surge move. The amount you move is optional. So if you didn't want your Metamorphs in combat, where you risk fluffing your attacks and dying, but were happy just surging a few inches less onto an objective, then you can control it, do that. Totally fine. You move up to D6, or up to 6 inches depending on weapon loadout for the Metamorphs. Some abilities that surge said up to D6, while others said move D6. It is all up to D6, and you can choose not to move. 0 inches is an option. When you're fighting on death, for example from stratagems you can use in the Hallowed Martyrs attachment, you continue to give out and receive special rules and abilities and auras. So if you fought on death with your Repentia, the unit you often use it on, the superior will still convey the reroll to hit and wounds to her unit as she and they fight on death. I think most people were playing it that way anyway, but if you weren't, now you know. There is a little boarding patrol update, but that doesn't do anything to fix the many issues with it, like Deathwatch veterans not being Adeptus Astartes, not being able to take Dark Reapers to include Magun Ra, and many others. It only gets a small amount of attention. The tournament rules get more. And the match play using the Pariah Nexus match play mission deck definitely does. Marked for death as a secondary mission now makes more sense. You kill the bodyguard unit and at least one character if it was an attached unit to achieve that secondary mission. So if you were attacking a Battle Sister squad that had a Canoness and an Imagifier, you would have to kill at least all of the Battle Sisters and one of the characters. I think this kind of ruling should apply to other times when you have to destroy a certain unit in like a Crusade game or a bunker mission and an attached unit is selected. And the secret missions in Pariah Nexus have also got a little bit of a change, which I think Games Workshop said is meant to help the Genestealer Cult, but I don't think it helps the Genestealer Cult. The secret missions, like getting battle line units into the enemy deployment zone and having control of 3 objectives at the end of the game, they are very manageable for the Genestealer Cult. But unless playtesting shows differently, I'm seeing a penalty, a nerf, for the Genestealer Cult. You can't score the primary mission in Battle Round 5. That was something I did to get my failing primary up to 20 points before I got another 20 points from the secret mission, if the game went to 5 rounds. Few other factions will have the troops around in the last turn to score. That is an advantage I think the Genestealer Cult have lost. It was only in the Leviathan mission deck where you picked a gambit and from then on you were forbidden from scoring any more primary mission points. In the Pariah Nexus mission deck, when you picked a secret mission, it was just that you are capped at 20 victory points for the primary mission. Okay, but the points were mainly here for points. Games Workshop wants to bring down the Adepta Sororitas and bring up the Genestealer Cult. As this is a points update, that will mean points up for Sisters units and points down for Genestealer Cult units, but later in the year, probably December, A new balanced datasheet and points update will come out, which will change Miracle Dice and Cult Ambush. So, don't buy a codex for Christmas. The book will not be correct. So if December's bringing new standalone Deathwatch rules, new Miracle Dice rules, new Cult Ambush rules, how much of a codex do-over that will be, we will have to see. But hey, all three of the factions are being talked about again. I don't get a Christmas. It's all videos about Warhammer. The Adepta Sororitas points are what we're going to do first. I was almost exactly dead on with my points predictions, but that video didn't go out in time before this update, so you'll have to trust me. Or just watch what I have to say because it is mostly accurate. I know what you're thinking. Right now, the Adepta Sororitas are doing really well after the launch of their 10th edition codex. They don't need fixing. Not like the Genestealer Cult needed fixing. The Battle Sisters work a little too well. If we are talking points and balancing points, the Adepta Sororitas is not broken beyond belief, but I can see where some points increases could be beneficial to the overall meta. While tournaments are their own separate thing, they do provide at least a playing ground for what is the most extreme and optimized build. That is something that we can then change, so it is going to help how we play our casual games, the everyday games. All of the games. The tournament army we see performing well most often is a variant of the Bringers of Flame detachment. It is a very strong detachment. It increases the short-range firepower for a faction that already specializes in short-range firepower. We want a boost to the other detachments, or what would be more likely, a blow to the Bringers of Flame detachment. Except neither will happen soon. What comes first is a points change. What I expect to see is a points increase on the following units, maybe just 5 points, maybe 10 points, but the overall result would be that the one tournament build becomes much more expensive to run and other units and detachments look more promising. The Triumph of St. Catherine. Being able to speed all other units is the best ability. It makes Deep Strike easy to then charge from. It makes Paragon Warsuits into a missile. So expect a 10 points increase on the Triumph. 10 points up on the Triumph of St. Catherine, he says. Oh, past/present/potentially future von Carmian. Oh, you silly, silly thing. How about 60 points more on the Triumph of St. Catherine? 190 points to 250 points. Would you like an eighth of your army to be one model? You could. It is a very strong unit. But I think this is very much in the ebb and flow of points. A lot of people were taking the Triumph of St. Catherine. The Triumph of St. Catherine did very well in tournaments. And now Games Workshop is like, let's see some other models rotated in the price range. I mean, no, we're not doing this to sell models, don't be silly. We just want other Adepta Sororitas units to shine for a moment. So this is a big, don't take the Triumph of St. Catherine. I have survived very well in competitive lists without the Triumph of St. Catherine. I think you can manage as well. But I am right that this will be a big blow to that one tournament list that everyone was taking some variant of. The Triumph was a big part of it. If we see people taking out the Triumph to compensate for all of the other point increases, I think that is what will make Games Workshop happy enough that the Bringers of Flame is sufficiently toned down. Maybe. And the Dominions. In the Bringers of Flame detachment, they are a staple, and in that detachment, they win out over the currently equally pointed Battle Sisters for most people. So I would expect an increase of 10 points on that unit. 1 point per model may not change many minds on the comparison between the two equally pointed units, and I have a more dedicated video that directly compares the two. I still think Retributors are too expensive, especially when double the models in a Dominion squad is right there and cheaper. But a points increase on Dominions may be all the rebalance we get. Retributors do see tournament play, just nowhere as near as often as the awesome Dominions with their similar weapons and reactive move. Well, I was right that the Dominions went up by 10 points, 115 points to 125. However, what I wasn't expecting was that they would also bring down the points of the Battle Sisters by 10 points. They went from 115 to 105 points for 10 to emphasize the difference between them and Dominions. I really like Battle Sisters. Yes, you get a very similar level of guns as you get to the Dominions. say, a multi-melter and a melter gun compared to 4 melter guns, but it's now 20 points cheaper, and the Battle Sisters are OC2, and the Battle Sisters can take multiple characters. A Hospitaller and a Palatine will keep the unit alive and let them now put a lot of damage. I know you don't get Scout unlike the Dominions, and I know that the Dominions have a reactive move. But I'm expecting regular Battle Sisters to see a lot more play. The Retributors are still costing too much, but costing the same as Dominions now. They haven't changed in their points, it's 125 for 5. And they give you more melter shots than Dominions from their multi-melters. 4 multi-melters give you 8 shots compared to the Dominions' 4 melter guns giving you 4 shots. That may see the Retributors become a more popular choice. Not for me though. I think they're still too weak to small arms fire with a maximum of 5 models in the squad, and as soon as you lose 2, you're massively cutting into the amount of melter output. But if you were taking 2 Dominion squads and 1 Battle Sister squad, changing it to 2 Battle Sister squads and a Dominion squad should see you get that points difference back. The Dialogus remains exceptionally cheap, but now has an invulnerable save which she didn't in the index. She could operate alone to complete secondary missions, taking up the role that competitively, like in tournaments that ban legends, the Death Cult Assassins and the Crusaders used to do. As Crusaders are currently 40 points, the Dialogus is likely to also go up to 40 points. The Castigator is currently the same points as the Vindicare Assassin when allied into other Imperial armies. Obviously the tank is way better. You don't need to have a precision sniper shot when you have a massive cannon that blows away the character and all of the bodyguard unit at the same time. So I expect the Castigator to increase by 20 points. And while I would love a bit of a drop on the Exorcist as it costs a little bit too much, Games Workshop seems determined to maintain the pressure against indirect fire weapons, so I'm not expecting a change there. The Immolator will likely take a hit, perhaps up to 20 points. I prefer the Rhino as a transport vehicle, but if you need more units to complete secondary and primary missions, the Immolator ability to turn a gun-toting Dominion squad into a gun-toting Dominion squad and a utility squad with bolters is great. Or they can make a utility Battle Sister squad, and the other half of the Battle Sister squad becomes a cheap bodyguard for the Triumph of St. Catherine. This works because you split the unit, then you assign characters. Immolators are unlikely to survive a points update without a hit. I was right about the Dialogus going up by 10 points for a utility in completing secondary missions, and the Castigator went up by 10 points, not 20, as did the Immolator, going up by 10 points, not 20. It could have been worse, especially when the Exorcist could have also gone up, continuing Games Workshop's increase in points on indirect fire weapons, but it didn't, so we can rest easier. Morwen Val may get an increase, but the Paragon Warsuits remain the same cost. As a combo, they are great. Previously, Games Workshop had done this very thing, increase Val's points while leaving the Paragon Warsuits alone, so the Warsuits can be taken, but there is a little disincentive to include Val. I think the Seraphim will stay at the same points value. They didn't have any change between the Index and the Codex, and if Games Workshop wants people to use the Army of Faith, then they're not going to want to put Seraphim up in points anymore. Much like with Morwen Val and the Paragon Warsuit, they could do a points increase to the Canoness with Jump Pack, who sometimes goes alone just to complete secondary missions, but also has that one enhancement that makes the Seraphim Flamers really, really good. Again, I don't think they'll put the points up on that, because they've said before that they don't want to have enhancements that cost nearly as much as the characters that wield them. So a points increase on the Jump Canoness may be what we get instead of a points increase on the Seraphim. I would like to see a 1 point decrease on Zephyrim to bring them in line with Seraphim, but that is unlikely to happen. Games Workshop doesn't like to change too many points at once. I believe they will target the tournament staples and leave it at that. For a points decrease, Repentia and Sacrosanct are probably the only ones that will receive the good kind of points change. Repentia costs too much outside of the Penitent Host, and Sacrosancts have no ideal detachment as a combat unit that doesn't have the Penitent keyword. I would like to see a drop of 1 to 2 points per model on them. It seems that Games Workshop disagreed with me on that and went with an increase to the Seraphim. 1 point per model more, but 2 points per model more on a unit of 10 to discourage those big blocks of fire. They are a strong unit in the Bringers of Flame detachment, which is the target of these points attacks, but they're a key unit in the Army of Faith too, which does not deserve a hit. Several stratagems in the Army of Faith work as auras on jump pack units, the Seraphim being the most useful, but overall this is impacting the tournament Bringers of Flame lists. We can see that they were the target because of the enhancements only going up for that detachment. 5 points more for each enhancement, and 10 points more for the Fire and Fury enhancement. The ability to cause devastating wounds and get more shots from flamer weapons with the Jump Pack Canoness, a unit of Seraphim with hand flamers, as many hand flamers as you can fit, the Bringers of Flame, Fire and Fury enhancement, and a stratagem to cause devastating wounds. That is really great in the Bringers of Flame detachment. That is why the Seraphim went up in points. So this is very much to change the internal balance of the faction and make the other detachments more viable, but not by making them better, just by making the Bringers of Flame combos more expensive to include in your army. But I did get my wish of Zephyrim coming down by 1 point, though not the other units. I also want to see a points drop on Repentia, who are really good in the Penitent Host detachment, but not 18 points per model good outside the detachment, and there is no points change on the Sacrosancts either. The Paragon Warsuits and Val shared the points increase, 10 points each instead of just Val getting the increase. They really benefit from each other now that the Warsuits can add +1 to hit and wound rolls against monsters and vehicles. That will also affect Val while she's leading that unit. These are a key unit for taking out larger enemies, so I can't see either Val or her gang of big girls dropping from anyone's list in any detachment. That is all of the changes. They all focus around the Bringers of Flame staple units. I don't think Bringers of Flame will stop seeing tournament play, but we may get an increased number of Rhinos as transports, fewer cases of the Jump Canoness with Fire and Fury and Seraphim blocks, and more Battle Sisters in the Bringers of Flame. Remember that Dominions always have assault weapons on all but the Superior, and the Battle Sisters benefit more from the assault weapons than the Dominions do in the Bringers of Flame detachment. The example tournament list that I've been showing off used to cost 1,990 points. Now it costs 2,180 points. That is quite a significant increase. So I think what a lot of people will do is drop the Triumph and Righteous Rage, and maybe get another Zephyrim unit for things like behind enemy lines and other secondary missions. My own 2,000 point list went up by 50 points. If you play Adepta Sororitas, you will have to let me know how many points your list went up by in the comments. Perhaps sister players will use other detachments more, even for just a short time, as we have some rules clarifications on other detachments, and the first one is not what I hoped for. There is very weird wording on the Penitent Host detachment, unlike things like, say, the Gladius Task Force, or even the Ordo Xenos detachment. That's where you have 3 different things that can activate in different turns. You activate them at the start of your turn, and they last until the end of the battle round. You get a choice when you activate them and which one you activate them, but they're once per game. The Penitent Host detachment is worded differently. At the start of the battle round, select one of the following Vows of Atonement to be activated for your army, and it lasts until the next battle round. You can only select each one once per battle. This doesn't seem to be giving you a choice of whether you activate one or not, and that is apparently intentional. If you're using the Penitent Host detachment, do you have to select a Vow of Atonement every battle round? And the answer is yes, meaning that from the 4th battle round onwards, you don't get a Vow of Atonement for your army because you've already used all 3 of them. You had to use one in Battle Round 1, you had to use one in Battle Round 2, and you had to use the last one in Battle Round 3. So that is annoying, and I don't think anyone had expected Games Workshop to be like, this is exactly how we intended it to be from the wording. However, with a little bit of a boost, but only a minor one, if a character with the Verse of Piety enhancement was using an enhancement to activate a different Vow of Atonement at the start of a battle round, but they died, the rest of the unit will still get the Vow of Atonement until the end of the battle round. So for at least one unit, you can have a Vow of Atonement for 4 battle rounds. And for the Hallowed Martyrs detachment, if you had the Saintly Example enhancement, which means that when you are destroyed, you generate an extra D3 miracle dice, Imagifiers can let you reroll miracle dice you gain. It isn't just once per phase or once per unit. So if you rolled a 3 as a character died, all 4 of the miracle dice you got, you would be able to reroll any or all of them to get better miracle dice. And there are 2 more rules clarifications. Well, one's a clarification. What I would say is definitely a rules change. The first one, if Celestine goes down, on Greyfax, if Celestine goes down and then returns because you rolled that 2+, any persisting effects continue to apply to her like Oath of Moment or Votan Judgment tokens. She isn't really dead and being replaced with another similar Celestine. This isn't like with the Genestealer Cult getting new units through Cult Ambush where it is a whole new but identical unit. The second change, the Cherubs. When you split a unit with an Immolator, because it was a unit ability, both of the units that got split by the Immolator would have the Cherub ability. Now only one of the new units can make use of that ability during the battle, and you have to make a note of which one that will be by putting the Cherub token next to that unit. So disregard any other time I said you get one for each unit. That was the past. That was how the rules worked back then. Rules were different. And if I ever said by accident that you don't get a Cherub in each unit, well, I just have excellent foresight. Not a witch. I just have tactical ingenuity. This is easy to remember because you get one Cherub in the box, unless you're Retributors, but they don't split. Retributors don't split, just Battle Sisters and Dominion squads. They can split. You pick one of the half units to carry the Cherub, only that one half unit will be affected by the Cherub. Remember that when you split a unit with an Immolator, they are separate units now for the rest of the game for all purposes. If an aura or a character is in one of the half units, it does nothing to affect the other half unit. Okay, now for something completely different, and we'll talk about the Genestealer Cult, where the points are going the other way. There are a lot of cheaper units, and that is okay. What we really want is better rules, and they may be coming in December with yet another change to Cult Ambush. A points drop is not ideal for Horde armies. I'm already using more than 100 cultists continually coming back, and now we'll be using more. I'm not going to get more models, just more movement trays. And I'll find a way to get more models without getting more models. All of the battle line units are cheaper. Neophytes at 65 points for 10 is a steal. They have a great range of weapons, although we can't double up on weapons now, but they're a mainstay in all detachments for having 10 regenerating bodies to complete actions, hold objectives, and just get in the way of the enemies. Acolytes with mining weapons and auto pistols went down 1 point per model. Great. Acolytes with hand flamers are also down 1 point per model, making them a more viable choice compared to metamorphs who can also take hand flamers. Mostly, the time of acolytes with demo charges is gone, but the hand flamers are great, especially in the Xenocreed detachment when you can advance and still shoot them, and the detachment lets you advance and charge. I have a long video on the greatness of the advance and charge detachment. To further help that detachment, the Icon Ward is down by 10 points. I prefer to put the Icon Ward on Acolyte hybrids as they gain a 5+ Feel No Pain compared to the slight boost to the Metamorph's existing Feel No Pain. The Xenocreed detachment is now looking a lot better. The Primus is another key part of that, and they finally get a points drop, now 80 points when they were 90 points. So many other armies have similar characters for way cheaper, so even a little points drop is appreciated. And the Benefactus is 70 points instead of 80 points. Oh, well, that's nice to know. Good mention. Still not worth the points for the little boost that they provide. 50 points would have been better, bringing them in line with the Magos, although we still see no points change on the Magos. Aberrants are an interesting one. They are 135 points for 5, down from 150 points, but a unit of 10 remains at 300 points. I guess the Biosanctic Broodsurge didn't deserve too much of a boost. Because you can only take 3 of these units in your army, you go for the big units in that detachment. But in other detachments, a 15 point saving is nice. Though very often Metamorphs are preferred, and I can't see that changing. To further help the Biosanctic Broodsurge, the Patriarch is down to 75 points from 85 points. I love the Patriarch. We all love the Patriarch. The Patriarch is the divine one. The devastating wounds they provide for pure strains can tear through tanks in turn 1. And don't forget your enhancements in the Biosanctic Broodsurge to make the god into a monster. I like that points drop a lot. Once again, we have a very cheap god. And that god must be blessing us because the Achilles Ridge Runner is untouched. How do we manage that? Do Games Workshop still have more stock they need to sell? Well, hey, if you want one, be sure to check out those affiliate links in the description. That is cheaper than buying through Games Workshop and helps out the channel. Perhaps the unit was seen as a key part to make all of the detachments function, and we just can't do without it. That is fair. That is accurate. The Outlander Claw detachment also got help, a points drop of 2 points per model on the Jackal Bikers, which they were overcosted. But I find that odd when at tournament level, the Outlander Claw was performing the best. Their Alphas is also down by 5 points, as is the Serpentine Tactics enhancement to let them shoot after falling back. When no detachment is really strong, it does make sense that they all got a boost, but Outlander Claw is very good for objective control and survivability, which the stratagems focus on. And cheaper bikes do help. They may see more play instead of just mechanized tactics as a whole. For allied units in the Brood Brothers detachment, the Sentinel, which is beloved by Astra Militarum players for being both regiment and squadron, and so getting lethal hits on everything in the Born Soldiers detachment, it's 5 points cheaper. The Field Ordnance Guns are 10 points cheaper, but they still underperform compared to Legends or Imperial Armor Artillery. But the heavy weapon squads, often mortars, sometimes las cannons, especially for us where we want line of sight to activate the detachment rule, they're down by 10 points at 50 points. This is great as an alternative and cheaper choice to the Benefactus. Why have mined las cannons when you can have actual las cannons? For the rules changes and clarifications, they're mostly around the Brood Brothers detachment, which is understandable because it's a weird mix of two armies being thrown together. The tank commander that we can take in the Brood Brothers detachment has rules changes, or rather clarifications, in the index card update document. You can't use big guns never tire when they die unless you somehow died in your own shooting phase, so activating the death befitting an officer is less likely to happen. If you are locked in combat and killed, it doesn't matter if you rolled a 2+, you don't get to shoot. And the most likely way to die in your own shooting phase is from explosions from other tanks, but that isn't an attack, so you won't be able to trigger death befitting an officer. They also receive the squadron keyword, but went up by 20 points. For Genestealer Cult players, since you can't use orders, there are many other battle tanks I suggest otherwise in another video. The Kazakin that we can ally in can use orders. I kept saying so, and most people agreed that it made sense, that officers lose the voice of command, but the whole order rule doesn't go away and vanish into the ether. So Brood Brother Kazakin can use their own Warrior Elite rule to issue an order to themselves. Excellent. But we have a very sad change. Not only can the Warlord of the Brood Brothers Auxilia not be an Astra Militarum unit, they have to be a Genestealer Cult model. This, finally, after 14 months, stops the Inquisition from leading a Brood Brothers army. Ah well, I guess Games Workshop noticed my video and wanted to put a stop to it all. If you want to know how it worked, it is a lot of fun. Totally impractical, but fun. And on the note of Games Workshop making my videos invalid, a few days ago I released a video about the Cult Ambush rule and tunnel crawlers. Part 2 of that video is still correct, but now, even though you are not deep striking when using Cult Ambush, you can use the tunnel crawler stratagem on a unit as long as you set them up as if by deep striking, using the Cult Ambush rule, but without using the Cult Ambush markers. And it's not deep strike, but you can use the stratagems as if it was deep strike. And you do still get the advantage of the detachment special rule at the same time. Good. Overall, this is good. Lots more models for the Genestealer Cult. I think it will help a little for the players that already have lots of Genestealer Cult models. Otherwise, we wait and see what the rules changes are for the Cult Ambush, a rule that Games Workshop has had so much trouble with, and the end of the year will see the 5th version of it. Perhaps just you deep strike lots, or another change to which units come back and how often. I have already released my own suggestions on how to fix the Genestealer Cult, and I will leave that at the end of the video for you and any Games Workshop rules writers to take a look at. And finally we turn to the Deathwatch. Ah, their points. Well, everyone got cheaper Terminators. Except for Deathwatch and Grey Knights. The Deathwatch Terminators in Legends remain at 210 points, and Grey Knights are getting a codex in early 2025, so it seems no points changes for them. The Imperial Agents Grey Knight Terminators got no change, and points only went up. The Subductors, the good shield cops with the invulnerable save, are 15 points more expensive as allies to other Imperial forces. I was really hoping for some points drops to Imperial Agents within their own codex when used as an army. Their win rate is something like 35% when run as their own army. Their special rule is basically, you are cheaper as an army than when taken as allies. But not without a points drop. The Deathwatch cost the same as allies compared to being in their own army faction. There are several reasons why no points change. They are a pretty new codex and I haven't had much tournament play to see which units get taken and which units need an improvement. It might just be all units needing an improvement, and they're not seeing much play on tournament tables because of how not great they are. The second is, perhaps they were never meant to be an army, just a fun thing you can do having them all together. Have a weird mix of units, like how the Index worked, but then the Deathwatch got thrown in and it gets upsetting for many Deathwatch players. That would explain why the points as allies got an update, not the points within the codex. And the third reason is, like the Grey Knights, Games Workshop wants to wait until they know what they're doing with the standalone Deathwatch, in quotations, codex, set for re-release in December. Still not a good time for the Imperial Agents. But they have an FAQ, so the Rhino carries 12 infantry models, not 12 models. Did we all have fun pulling rhinos out of rhinos? Good. Now we can move on. There are a few final changes. The Legends points document has been updated with the Blood Angels units that were missing from the Codex. So if you didn't know about Mad Max Furioso Dreadnought, they are in Legends at 150 points, same as they were before. I don't think any other points have been updated because on the Legends points document, Games Workshop refuses to even highlight them in red or green as changes. I will complain, and they should also include the amount a unit is changed by, like they do in Age of Sigmar. And one other interesting rule I want to point out. The Astra Militarum, the friend of the Genestealer Cult, have a little change in their army rule that you should note. You can no longer issue orders to battle-shocked units. Previously, the rule was that if a unit became battle-shocked, they lost the order, but there was nothing preventing you from ordering scared and disorganized guardsmen. Now there is, it makes sense, but I don't think it will be massively appreciated by the Imperial Guard. They are an army that needs some improvement. Well, let's focus on the Genestealer Cult improvements and what you could do if you just wanted to homebrew your own versions of the Genestealer Cult and what kind of rules we should be getting. My darlings and viewers, have a great time with the new points of 40k.